Yo, family, I got Nephilim Apocalypse Part 2 for you guys by popular demand. So, I neglect to mention the other day when I'm there at the Noah's Ark that, in the 10th grade, our Bible teacher, our awesome Bible teacher, who taught us the angel view of Genesis 6, we never talked at lunchtime about the things we just learned in Bible class. I mean, that would have been really square, right? And but the one time that we actually did all talk about it was Genesis 6, angel view. I mean, we're learning this stuff back 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, and people just didn't talk about it then. I guess maybe they spoke about it in fancy seminaries, but nobody spoke about it like in public or like in general. I don't think most people even knew about it, but it intrigued a lot of us, and we all discussed it really a lot. And a lot of us noted too that that's the one subject that we had discussed during lunch. Why would the devil need to continue on with his plan of a Nephilim apocalypse if Jesus already defeated him on the cross and he was unable to ruin the bloodline? So that the Anthropos, God, man, Jesus being 100% man, 100% God at the same time. Well, in order to fulfill the prophecy, Jesus had to be the Son of Man, okay? And so he did fulfill that prophecy. But what if these hybrid creatures could serve Satan another way, serve his plan another way? Because just as the end time scenario was part of the plan of God, the revelation of Jesus Christ, as it's called, there at the end of the good book, the devil's got plans for this limited 7-year period of time that God gives him to rule the entire earth through his seed, through his son, the Antichrist. And if he had been given even one moment longer by God, we would all be dead. And that's what the Bible also says. So strap yourselves in. I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet today and give you as much as I can. I got a busy day ahead. Pray for me. There's agents swarming everywhere. But even if there were 10,000 agents, no match for the Lord. No match at all. Back in 2008, there was a feature film called The Day the Earth Stood Still. It starred Keanu Reeves, Jennifer Connelly. It's a pretty good movie. But the first one I saw was the original in 1951. That was released by 20th Century Fox. It was one of the biggest sci-fi films of the time. It's still one of the biggest sci-fi films in the history of Hollywood. And essentially what happens is this, the aliens arrive, spaceship lands on the lawn there in Washington, D.C. Out walks this android robot named Gort, G-O-R-T. And he's basically indestructible. I mean, they can't shoot him down. They can't do nothing to Gort. He just lasers them with his eyes. People just disintegrate or are vaporized by his attack. And everybody's dumbfounded by the vast strength of the aliens, or at least how they appear to be vastly stronger. And the alien comes out, and he's going to unite the entire planet. Peace and safety is how they're going to do it, says the Bible. And this movie kind of gives you some hints as to what's going to happen. Way back in 1987, in America, we had a president named Ronald Reagan. He was an actor in Hollywood, not in any major A-list films. It was all B-list stuff, but he was an actor nonetheless. And a lot of people think he did a good job as president. I do. But back in 1987, he's addressing the United Nations General Assembly. And just a side note here, after the League of Nations was founded, it dissolved because of the World War. And after World War II, the United Nations was founded to prevent the scourge of war from succeeding generations of mankind. And there's no reason to believe that
the United Nations would not be dissolved. At the outbreak of World War III, people aren't going to be able to get along. Nations won't be able to get along. It'll be nation against nation. Okay, so unlikely that the United Nations would proceed. A lot of people who teach that America is Mystery Babylon, like the cults do, um, say that the United Nations is headquartered in New York City, but that's false. There are two headquarters of the United Nations. One is in Switzerland and the other is in the United States. So don't be deceived by any of that nonsense. Got a whole video about Mystery Babylon and who it is. Okay, in case you're curious. The elect of God are supposed to know all the mysteries, including Mystery Babylon, according to Jesus. So Ronald Reagan's there at the New York headquarters of the United Nations in 1987, and he's given a speech. It's a very popular speech, and you got to, for some background, you got to understand that several former presidents of the United States, you can get the interviews here on YouTube. President Ford, President Reagan, President Carter, President Truman, they're all on record as having witnessed UFO phenomenon personally. Okay, and you can say that these are a bunch of crazies, but they're not a bunch of crazies. These are the men that we elected as our presidents, and they all of them had a UFO witness story. They knew what they saw. So Reagan's there in front of the entire world assembled, all of the ambassadors, and when you have a high-level meeting like this, a lot of the heads of state are there too. But he essentially tells the United Nations, can we and all nations not live in peace? Okay? Because, like I said, peace and safety in the Bible is how they're going to do it. Can we not all live in peace? He says, perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize how often we forget how much unites the members of humanity. And he says that he sometimes thinks how quickly all of our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an quote unquote alien threat from outside this world. And then he goes on and says, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? Okay, so that plants the seed there that one day the entire earth could be united by a threat of aliens. Sticks and stones may break my bones. Maybe you heard that. We used to say too when I was a kid, I know you are, but what am I? And if you've suffered any of the gaslighting by the bad guys, with the stalking by gangs and stuff, you know that they will call you exactly what they are. And there is a court case going on with the gang stalking phenomenon. They've got an attorney. She seems pretty smart. She's here on YouTube as well, on a few of the TI channels. But the courts are going to call her claim, quote unquote, delusional. They're not going to give her a jury trial. They're not going to care how much evidence there is. Somebody's going to get on the phone to that judge and say this is a national security matter and call her delusional. And I've had that experience. No matter how much evidence you have, no matter how many witnesses you have, no matter how corrupt you can prove the court system is with corrupt judicial assignments. And I left a vast paper trail. Okay, no way they're going to cover that up, even if I'm no longer around. Those records are permanent. But they'll call you delusional, even though they are the ones that are suffering a delusion. So you have here in the second epistle to the Thessalonians some teaching by the Apostle Paul on the Antichrist, also known as the son of perdition, who's coming to deceive the whole world by this delusion of peace and safety. And here in 2 Thessalonians 2, the apostle tells us that the Antichrist shall be destroyed by the brightness of the coming of the Lord. Okay, so his days are numbered, even before he gets here. But the Word of God says that because those who might be damned didn't believe the truth, Jesus is the truth with a capital T, the one called faithful and true, the way, the truth, and the life. But Despite warning, they took pleasure in unrighteousness. They regarded iniquity rather than the majesty of Christ. And so, because of that, God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie. Now, what is the lie? Okay. Well, Jesus tells us in Matthew 24 that a big part of the lie is going to be false Christs and false prophets, and they're going to show great signs and wonders, inasmuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Well, so these false signs and wonders that the false prophet at the end time and the Antichrist that they're going to be, calling down fire from heaven and stuff, they're not going to fool anybody who knows the Lord. But the Revelation also says that the devil deceives. He leads. In other words, the devil leads the entire world astray. That's all of us. That's everybody. So even the elect, even though they're not deceived by these false signs and wonders, these great false signs and wonders, the devil has deceived us all in some way and led us all astray. So how does this figure into the equation? What is the strong delusion? Well, I think number one, it is that they'll say there is no God and there is no devil. And they're going to need these half angel Nephilim that they're creating, by alien abduction encounters, by stealing your seed without you knowing, honey pots like we were talking about in the last video. Essentially, Genesis 6 and the hybrids were already part of the narrative. This ancient astronaut theory, people having tattoos that they say that they're part alien. I've got alien blood, blah blah blah. They would say stuff like that. The devil, when he puts a plan together, he'll attack you, usually using other men. Okay, that's the easiest. Usually those that are closest to you, your friends, your family. That's how he gets you. Now, there was an old meme on the internet a long time ago. It's a lot harder to find than it used to be. But here I'm going to recreate it for you to the best of my memory. And it was essentially that this guy, the great beast Aleister Crowley, the famous Satanist, get together with all these other guys that turned out to be famous and help indoctrinate the world with the strong delusion. Remember that strong delusion is there is no God, there is no devil. And so Aleister Crowley ultimately, because the devil is the father of all lies, fooled Aleister Crowley. Crowley thought that he was the Antichrist. I'm sure the devil told him he was. But there on his deathbed, he was fooled. He didn't take over the whole world. The devil had got him good. Pulled a fast one on old Crowley, but it was too late. If he's already dead, in hell, it's too late for him to change. And there's a famous story called Babylon Working, spelled Babalon. And it essentially says back in 1946 that Jack Parsons from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and L. Ron Hubbard, and they all got together and they're trying to summon the Antichrist there back in 1946. Now, I don't, and a lot of people say that means that America's Mystery Babylon too, but it didn't really work. I mean, I think they wound up getting a girlfriend and stuff, pregnant. The thought is that there has always been an Antichrist, a son of perdition, a son of Satan, lying in wait, just waiting around for whenever there is going to be the end, because no one knows the day or the hour but God the Father in heaven. Okay. So that there's always been one waiting. But this Antichrist of Babylon Working had been the Antichrist. He'd be going on 80 years old now, okay? And I told you in a previous video, I'm pretty sure that the Antichrist, being a type of false Christ, will come on the scene when he's about 30 years old, just like our Lord himself started his ministry when he was 30. So the Babylon Working thing, very interesting to see the connection between Jack Parson, L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, and this famous Satanist Aleister Crowley. I know Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard had some issues with sharing of women and some business dealings related to a boat, and it was all kind of, sordid is the best way I could describe it. It was sordid and dirty, the entire relationship. But Jack Parsons wound up blowing himself up, or somebody blew him up there when he was working on a project. And L. Ron Hubbard, there are channelers who channel a demon called Elron, Elron. I did discuss in a previous video Operation Snow White, where the government was infiltrated with some 5,000 Scientologists, 138 different government agencies, including the federal court system, and posted the link to the court case that discussed all of that. But another part of the group was Werner von Braun from the Third Reich and the Fourth Reich, father of modern rocketry. He really made the American rocket system work. I mean, he was the man to make that work. A lot of documentaries on him. I don't need to explain him too much. I think of all these men here, he's probably the best known to most of you. Walt Disney was included in that. You can see a lot of videos on YouTube where they slow down the animations, and there's dirty stuff in the various animations in Disney films, including when Walt Disney was still alive. The thought is that one of the most evil things you could do if you are a Satanist or a Luciferian or whatever they want to call themselves is to kill your own mother, because you're killing that which gave life to you. Okay, and of course Disney's mom, I think the story goes, and this is from memory too, but he bought her a house, and somehow they say that the stove or the oven was defective, and she blew up. She was immolated. And lots of stuff about Disney, the Club 33, and there's all kinds of videos about that too. But he's one of these 7 men that were part of the scheme. It is said, this is all just a kind of an internet meme, and all my opinion, by the way. And another man, Rod Serling. I mean, geez, if you ever saw The Twilight Zone, there's some stuff you cannot unsee with The Twilight Zone, and it kind of messed me up in my head a few of those episodes. And The Twilight Zone, the movie, that was a lethal thing. There was a huge accident. Small children were killed. One of the actors that's still in the movie was decapitated, okay, during the filming of that whole thing. Just a horrible, horrible thing. I remember that episode where everybody's getting on board to flying saucers that look like a Gort landing, and they're flying off to another planet, and when the humans get there, it's just all the aliens decide they're carnivores and they want to eat all the humans. I mean, really some sick stuff. But Rod Serling was very creative, and Twilight Zone was an amazing series. People still watch it today. But there are some clues in that too. And then you see Gene Roddenberry here in one of the Star Trek uniforms. Gene Roddenberry was a member of my grandfather's country club. I mean, when I talk about some of the celebrities you would see there, you just kind of thought that when you're a kid, you kind of think everybody sees that, or at least a lot of people see that. But I didn't really recognize Gene Roddenberry, even though I was a big Trekkie. I was going to the club until many years later. But, Roddenberry, they called him the great bird of the galaxy. And the director of the Gort movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, also directed the very first Star Trek movie, Star Trek the Motion Picture, they called it. And I'm gonna tie in here what's going on with Gene Roddenberry in the next slide. Now, I was a Star Trek fan pretty big. I mean, I hardly watch anymore, so I used to know the entire Trek from beginning to end, but there's a bunch of new ones, and I've seen some of the new ones. I just haven't had time to watch the new ones, and really not a lot of a desire to watch some of the new ones. Although the ones I have seen have been fairly entertaining, but I used to know the whole trek. And there was one episode of the original series called Return of the Archons that left a lot of clues. There was another episode where there was a giant Apollo, like the Apollo that comes out of the abyss there in the Book of Revelation. The very last episode of the Next Generation, Q, the these series of beings that are said to be omnipotent, although logically there can only be ever one omnipotent being. That's God in heaven there. But anyway, this fictional Q tells Captain Picard that there was the primordial soups were seeded by ancient aliens. Okay, and earlier in the run of that show, the 7-year run of that show, there was an episode called The Chase, Chase. You see a picture here in the slide, and this alien gal shows up, and she looks like one of the founders from Deep Space Nine, okay, if you know your Star Trek. But she shows up and she basically explains to all these various races there. You got the Romulans, Klingons, Cardassians, and the humans and stuff. And she's explaining to them that's exactly what they did. The reason everybody looks alike in Star Trek is because these aliens went across the entire universe and seeded the primordial soups of everywhere, including Earth, with their DNA. And that DNA fused with ours, and this kind of like leads into, again, what is the strong delusion that there is no God, there is no devil. We're all kind of related to these aliens. We're living on a prison planet, and the whole world is led astray by that. And you got to wonder, how is the Antichrist and the false prophet going to pull this all off? You've got 1/3 of the angels fell with Satan. It means there's 2/3 of angels are still good. He's outnumbered 2-to-1 by the heavenly host. He's got to have as much help as he can get, and he makes as many half-human, half-angel hybrids as he can. That's going to be at least some extra help to him. And you see here in the slide on the left, you've got the creature Quetzalcoatl. That was the god of the Aztecs. He was known as a feathered serpent. There he is devouring up this poor guy. You know how serpents are. They will squeeze you until you're half dead, and then they'll swallow you whole while you're barely alive. So this feathered serpent was a Birdman chimera. There is a mention of that with King Sennacherib, who was the archenemy of King Hezekiah after Sennacherib lost the siege of Jerusalem, and one angel of the Lord slew 185,000 of his troops in one night. Sennacherib was going to worship his god. It says in the Bible, his god was a half man, half bird, a man with a bird head. Okay, and you've seen those all the way back in ancient Egyptology and stuff. They got the same thing. And you can see in the hieroglyphics too, they're birdmen. But old Sennacherib was killed by his own sons when he's walking in there to worship the devil. It says. Now, the story with the Aztecs is Quetzalcoatl will one day return, this feathered serpent. And I think that, I can't tell you if it's going to be the Antichrist or the false prophet who's going to be everything to everyone. But one of the ways the devil and the unholy trinity is going to get the entire world to follow, except for the small remnant of Israel and of Christians, is he's going to be everything to everyone. And so one of these evil persons of the unholy trinity is going to be Quetzalcoatl returned. He's going to be the fifth and final Buddha, the Buddha Maitreya. He's going to be the 10th and last avatar of Vishnu the Destroyer, called Kalki. He's going to be the 12th and final Imam of Islam, the Imam Mahdi. And realize that with this war that's going on between Hamas and Israel at the moment, that the leader of Hamas is on the record, and you can get the recording here on YouTube, where he says that he launched this attack where he beat up a bunch of old grandmas and kidnapped a bunch of old grandmas and sent hang gliders into that rave. Can you imagine? Because of this red heifer. Book of Numbers has a red heifer that's required for ritual sacrifice, purification of the priests in the temple. Nobody really knows, at least as nobody publicly knows, where the ashes were that Moses had made. In order for the end time scenario to start, the Antichrist will confirm a covenant of peace with all of Israel's neighbors, peace and safety. And so you don't have to have the temple for that. And from some of what Jesus said during his ministry, it seems like the temple is going to be rebuilt in a really short amount of time. And the Antichrist at some point does the abomination that causes desolation in the Holy of Holies in the temple, does the same thing as was done in the past with pig blood and defiling prior temples. I have to get into that on another date because that's a really deserves more time than I'm able to give it today. But the temple will need to be in Jerusalem and rebuilt at some point during the end time scenario. And so you've got the 12th and final Imam in Islam called the Imam Mahdi. And I think that the Antichrist or the false prophet will be him as well. There is a prophecy of Saint Malachi. I don't believe that the Catholic Church is going to play as huge a role in the end times as some people say, because the gates of hell will not prevail against it, even though they're going to try really hard. But there is a prophecy from Saint Malachi that the final pope will also be named Peter, the Rock, like the first pope was, except the last pope will be completely evil, unlike the first pope who was completely good. And it's difficult to determine, which pope is which because of so many anti-popes throughout history. But maybe we'll get into that some other point in the future too. When I was still in ministry to the Mormons, I ran across a thesis from a man. The common theme you get among ex-Mormons is, when I figured out it was all a lie, ... And so this guy had figured out it was a lie. His wife, fortunately, followed him out of the church. A lot of Mormons being deceived for their entire lives will go from one darkness of Mormonism into more darkness. And the only way out is to realize that the false Jesus of the Book of Mormon is just that, a false Christ, and to find the real Jesus, lead you out of that darkness into the light. And so this guy found his way, and he had cited in his thesis a bunch of end times scriptures from the Bible, some end time scriptures from Mormonism and teachings of the Mormon prophets and apostles. And his thesis was essentially that the prophet of the Mormon church would be the Antichrist. I'll tell you what, he made a pretty convincing case, and it ultimately helped me figure out what I'm trying to teach you here with this last slide. That these bad guys in the unholy trinity will be everything to everyone to get the whole world to follow. And so, like with that white horse prophecy in Mormonism, I think that the final Mormon prophet will also be the Antichrist or the false prophet. Quetzalcoatl will return, the Buddha Maitreya, Kalki, Petrus Romanus. There's a bunch of other names you could put here too, but these are the big ones that come to mind right now. I want to pray that God grant a double portion of the joy of God and of the peace of God on everyone who loves God and watches this video. And I also want to wish shalom to Israel and shalom to all of the children of God throughout the world. I love you all, and I can't wait to see you again. Bye-bye.